Hi, today we're going to be talking with pastor, podcast host, and author Tony and Bree Wood about their book, The Little Red Book of Marriage and Family. Stay tuned.
You don't want to miss it. You're listening to Marriage Mania, where we are audacious, sagacious, and tenacious for the Lord to uphold godly marriages and to raise fervent children who are countercultural and stand for biblical truth.
Hi, welcome back. We're so excited that you're here. I'm Tanya.
And I'm Michael.
And today we're going to be talking with pastor, podcast host, and author Tony and Bree Wood about their book, The Little Red Book of Marriage and Family. But before we get started, please subscribe here. It helps us to get the message out. We want to reach as many families as possible to share the love of Christ and to build strong marriages. We have a podcast that comes out every Tuesday, and we just want to be able to get out there and share. So let me introduce you to our guest today. Today we're talking with pastor and authors Tony and Bree Wood. Tony is a pastor of Mission Bible Church in Orange County, California. He has a doctorate from the Master's Seminary. He and his wife Bree co-host the podcast Date Night with the Woods, and we're talking with them today about their book, The Little Red Book of Marriage and Family. So I want to go ahead and bring our guest today. Enjoy our interview. Hi, Tony and Bree. We're so excited to have you here on our podcast today. Just such an honor, such an honor. Please tell our audience about you.
Well, I'll start. I want to say thank you for having us on. We love what y'all are doing. I'm Tony. This is my wife, Bree, and we are from California, so other side of the country from all y'all. I'm learning all y'all from all my friends in all y'all's places of the world. So
that's right.
Southern California, Mission Bible Church, and we have 3 children.
Yes,
you want to talk about the kiddos?
Ethan is our oldest. He's 18. He's at the Master's University. And then we have a daughter, Peyton Faith. She's 16, learning to drive right now. Such a sweetheart. And then our youngest is Ezekiel. He is in 5th grade and entering the preteen stage and loves to fill the home with science experiments. And
yeah, we like to say God gave us a boy and he gave us a girl and then he gave us something else with the third one. He's that's not a gender identity statement. That's just he's a wild guy. So
that's amazing. And what a blessing. Y'all are such a sweet family. I think we just saw your daughter on one of your recent podcasts. So that was super exciting to see a young lady talk about some interesting things around dating. So that was pretty cool.
And other topics, yeah.
Yes. So I love it. And that's another topic maybe we should talk about one day. But we are just so thankful for you guys. And yes, we're all the way on the other side of the country. So it's just great to see another brother and sister in Christ.
Yeah, we're so impressed and love all that you two are doing for the kingdom, pastoring a large church, podcasts, writing books, and that's in addition to counseling, discipleship, and homeschooling your children. I believe I saw that, and we love your book, The Little Red Book of Marriage and Family: 12 Principles for Relational Thriving, and we'd like to discuss some of that wisdom.
Okay, but before you do that, tell us why the name. It's so cute. Tell us about it.
Yeah,
why the name?
A great question. Actually, we had a brother who works in publishing who came to us and said, hey, I've been listening to the podcast, and then I had an idea why don't we try to take some of the stuff from the podcast and then turn it into a book? And then when we were brainstorming the name, he had mentioned there have been a couple of Little Red books that have already been put out. I think one was on golf like 100 years ago. One was on sales like 40 years ago. So he said, why don't we just kind of take that format, which is less academic and kind of more fun and user-friendly and edible, and then do that. And so I thought, that sounds fun. Mm-hmm. That sounds fun. So it's got pictures in it. I mean, it's not like a Sunday school book, but it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
so
application.
Cute.
Lots of application. That was the big thing.
Yes.
Is there's so many books on marriage talk a lot about the heartbeat of marriage, but not always how to do things practically. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of where we came up with the idea.
I love it. And it's red and bright. I love it.
The color of passion. Yes.
Yes. I love it.
I love things that are brilliant in its simplicity.
Yes.
And like I remember reading a Little Red Book of Theology in seminary. So that I see where that theme that you were talking about.
I didn't even know that existed. So that's actually helpful. Do you know who wrote it?
I'd have to look it up. I do
I'll
not.
check it out. Yeah,
I do not have to remember. So yes, I'll have to check that out and give the author for that. But I remembered the title when you said that, and so I was like, oh yeah, I remember reading a little red book of theology in seminary. So there's a series there. But and we wanted to start off with your first principle about the purpose of marriage. That both of you said in the book that as young adults approaching marriage, you didn't really understand God's purpose for marriage. And Tony, you were a pastor's kid.
Yeah.
You're I think you said a fourth generation pastor.
That's amazing.
And you said in your book, if you were in a game and anyone asked you as a kid the purpose for marriage, you would be the pastor's kid that didn't know. And as a pastor, you said in your book, all the premarital counseling that you have given over the years, you always ask, why are you getting married? And nobody, I think you used that exact word, nobody has given a biblical answer for that. They fumble around with answers like, I don't know, we love each other. But what answer should they be giving? What is the purpose of marriage biblically? And why do so many believers, even strong believers, not know God's purpose and design for marriage?
Yeah, Michael, what a great question. I think, just first off, there's a lot of things that I get wrong. And so pastor's kid in my entire life has basically been the pastor's kid who gets everything wrong. But I've been intrigued by that because I didn't know after all those years growing up in church, not from an eternal perspective, which is everything's for the glory of God. Obviously, marriage is a representation of the gospel, a beautiful metaphor. But on an earthly level, what's the primary thing that we're trying to accomplish when we get married? What are we doing this for? And so we'll sit in counseling, and if you ask a young couple, it really is 90 to 95% of the time, it'll be answers like we all would give. Hey, I want to have a family. He's really the nicest guy I've ever met. He loves the Lord. But then you point out things like, well, there's lots of guys that love the Lord. There's lots of people that make families who aren't married. A lot of times the guy will say something like, I just want to have sex without being guilty, which is fair, especially if they come out of a conservative Bible college or a Christian framework. And so what we're pointing out to them is even that. There's still a lot of people that have sex, don't feel guilt. And so what we try to show them is that in the Genesis record, there's that really key phrase when God makes man, and he says, it is not good that man should be alone. And so really you're trying to help people understand that this idea of companionship, of what we would call a best friendship, of sometimes even in the book we called it a contract of lifetime teammates, is really the heartbeat of what God gave us when he gave us marriage. I'm not doing life alone. She's not doing life alone. We get to do it together, and we get to wake up every morning, go to bed every night knowing we're a team. And so that was really the heart of that first chapter.
That's amazing.
Oh yeah, that's right on point and well stated. And my dad is a pastor, so I can relate. And he married us. And in pre-marriage counseling, the first question he asked us was, "Why are you getting married?" And we fumbled around for an answer. And every answer we gave, he challenged us with, "Well, why do you have to get married to do that?" And I could tell where he was going with this. I could tell he was really trying to get us to think about God's purpose and design for marriage. And had we thought about that? And he got me thinking, I should have a quick answer with this. Why haven't I been thinking more deeply about this? And why haven't I been taught this? And where's all the teaching, all this in the church, Sunday school and at home? And, I wish I could go back and give my dad a more coherent biblical answer. And I completely agree with you, Dr. Tony, that companionship and mutual support is primary. It's the first thing that God said he created marriage for when he said in Genesis, it's not good that man is alone. It reminded me of that. God is all about community. Let's give man a helper suitable for him, someone to share life together. And we hammer this point in our ministry that love draws us together and binds us as one, but love is not the main purpose of marriage. God created marriage for companionship, mutual support, to go through life together as partners in life. And according to Malachi 2:15 and Deuteronomy 6, he also created marriage for discipleship, to disciple each other in our walk with the Lord, and to disciple our children, to be passionate Jesus followers. And according to Ephesians 5, he created marriage to reflect God's kingdom, as the wife is a picture of the church and the husband is a picture of Christ, the head of the church. And when we do marriage God's way, we model his kingdom for the next generation. And I just love what you say about all this in the book. And Tony and Bree, the Bible also talks about marriage as a covenant, and you talk about that in your book. What does that mean for marriage to be a covenant?
Do you want to take this one?
Sure.
We're talking to the brother who literally wrote a workbook titled The Covenant, right? Or Covenant, the Covering.
The Covering.
So I think,
Based
everyone
off
needs to know
the...
Marriage Mania is putting out great resources as well.
Oh.
And so go ahead, Love.
Yeah, I mean, first looking at Ephesians 5 is so helpful, but specifically verses 31 through 33, it says, "For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is great, but I am speaking with reference to Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let each individual among you also love his own wife, even as himself, and let the wife see to it that she respect her husband." And I love this verse because it's bringing us back to, as I submit to my husband, earlier in the passage, I think verses 22 through 30, it's showing how the wife is to love her husband and the husband is to love his wife. And as I submit to my husband and my husband cares and leads me, we are reflecting the beautiful relationship that Christ has to the church, to this dark world. And so I think it starts there.
Yeah, it's really good. I think a lot about the word covenant when you ask, and it's interesting that in the Bible, covenant really is the strongest terminology that we have for commitment framework. And so in the Bible, you've got unilateral and conditional. I think when God designed marriage, it's important to always point out that there are facets to marriage that are conditioned, only in that Jesus gave us possibilities for an out in really rare circumstances. But by and large, the heartbeat of God is that we are in a binding unilateral covenant. Where basically I'm walking down the aisle and I'm saying, between you and me and people, and but also in the eyes of God, I'm covenanting to stay with you and to be with you until death do us part. And so the idea of divorce and the idea of walking away should not even be on the table for a couple when they're walking the aisle. And I think that's important to put out in front of the generation that we're currently ministering to, because as you guys know, I think we use words like commitment. We have the idea that I'll follow my heart. We have the idea that I can fall in and out of love. But the idea of an unconditional choice of the will, to say, I'm going to serve you for better, for worse, for richer, poorer, till death do us part, or the return of our Lord, is really the heart, the biblical heart of marriage.
I love that. And it fuels me because I love what Bree read. That is one of our favorite passages. And we know that God created a husband and a wife so that they can complement each other when they have their biblical roles, when they are submitting and loving one another, or loving the husband, loving the wife, and the wife submitting. It just works so perfectly. And then with the covenant in place, it's just that beautiful bind, like you're binding yourself together with the Lord, and you are in the strong commitment. And I know you said the commitment, but you're in a commitment. You're honoring God in your marriage. You're walking together. It's the three of you. And I love that three braided cord, not easily broken, having Christ in the center is just, I love everything that you said. And that's our generation just has a place where they're just like, okay, we're tired, or we feel out of love, or we've fallen out of love per se, and it's time to break up. And no, that's not the case. And we see a lot of this in marriage ministry, and we just, pressing on through these difficulties. Marriage is beautiful. This is something that God created. Only He could create and design a precious unity between a man and a woman.
Yeah, I just love everything you two and everybody is saying here, and it's very important too to know all this, and I don't know if most Christians think about marriage as a covenant, as you talk about, and what all this means. For many, a covenant is just a cute word that sounds pretty at a marriage ceremony, but covenants are very important in the Bible. The old and new covenants between God and believers defines our relationship with the Lord, and then of course there's the important covenants between God and Abraham, David, and Noah, and then marriage is a covenant, that binding agreement between a man and a woman in order to create a covenantal bond between husband and wife. Vows and rings are exchanged in front of God and witnesses in order to create that binding covenant for life, as you emphasize. And these are not just beautiful traditions. The binding agreement is being made before God and witnesses, and then the wedding night then consummates this binding agreement with a beautiful expression of love. Every time that the couple comes together is a reminder of this binding covenant and agape love that they share. And Song of Solomon gives a beautiful picture of this. And this is why, like any kind of sexual intimacy before marriage or outside of marriage is contrary to God's design. It's so important to understand God's design for marriage. And God designed husbands to lead their families and for wives to be their companion and helper. And you guys have a chapter on the leadership role of the husband. And Tony, you speak to the men very directly at one point and say, if you don't like who your wife has become, then look in the mirror. I think that was a bold statement. I really like that. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I do think that we were trying to be, we put a few disclaimers up there and kind of said, hey, ladies, why don't you skip this section so we can talk to the guys? And she does that as well a few times from her perspective. But I just wanted guys to be thinking deeply about what's happening if they're frustrated or concerned about issues in their marriage or with their spouse. Because as you know, leadership by its very nature is there is a level of authority that is granted, but that comes with responsibility. And a lot of times in leadership, our flesh will drive us when things aren't going well to start looking out the window. Who's to blame? Well, it's her or it's him or whatever. A coach, can blame the team, or a soldier can blame, a captain can blame a soldier. But a real leader is the one who accepts responsibility and says, hey, I'm going to look in the mirror. What have I done wrong? How have I led the team this direction? And that's why you see great coaches, at Alabama or in the NFL or wherever. A great general is always going to say, if we lost today, the reason that we lost today is because of something that I've done wrong. He's not going to put that on the troops per se. And so I think as a husband, I have to constantly come back to that and say, if we've been going down a road that I'm not pleased with, if there are small things, even what Solomon calls foxes in the garden, here in the home, I need to make sure that I pull back and I look at my own sacrificial leadership. Have I been communicating clearly? Although kindly, have I been communicating truthfully? Have I been setting up a structure in the home that's peaceful and that allows my wife to be victorious in what she's called to be in her role? And so that's what I was referring to there, is that if a guy is frustrated, why don't we start by taking a real hard look at where we've led the home and make sure that we deal with ourselves before we go to our spouse.
So good.
Yeah, that's so insightful. I just love that. And, a lot of times we don't think about that. Like when we're married, we can have a profound effect on each other. The other person oftentimes reacts to what we're doing, either positively or negatively. And if our marriage is going through a difficult time or our spouse is checked out and has disengaged, there's a lot we can do in ourselves that can have an enormous impact on the marital dynamic. And, how can spiritual leadership by the husband have a powerful effect on the health of the marriage and family?
Yeah, great question, Michael. I would even add in there that we actually walk down the aisle because we love and like that gal. And so if you're looking at control groups and change, the only change in the last 5 or 10 years, really the big one is me. And so what happened in there that I walked down an aisle absolutely head over heels in love and quote with this woman, and then 2, 3, 4, 5 years I have a problem. I'm the new reality, and so I have to really take a look at myself. But to answer the question for spiritual leadership, I think often we use that terminology, and I guarantee no matter what church you're at, what denomination you're in, you've heard that term. As a guy, we need to be spiritual leaders. We've got to be spiritual leaders. Everyone says that. But I don't know that we often talk about what that looks like. And so guys end up a little bit confused. And that was partially in the book why we put so much energy into saying, what would spiritual look like for a man in a home who says, as for me, my house, we're gonna honor the Lord. But I think the big answer to that is simply that spiritual leadership is being a lighthouse. And what I mean by that is a lighthouse is going to be standing there on the cliff or on the shore, and it's going to be shining a light. Now, whether the ships are going to follow it into harbor or whether they're going to choose to go their own way and crash into the rocks, ultimately that's going to be up to them. Leadership is not forcing everyone to do what you want them to do, but it's making so clear the truth of God's will through God's word, which is our authority, that everyone in the home, including your wife, including your children, understand what that home is going to look like and how it's going to please the Lord. And so that's the way I view spiritual leadership. How can I make it so clear in my home what devotions are, what family worship is like, what it means to go to church, why we go to church, what time we wake up, what time we go to bed, how we pray, why we pray, just so that everyone in the home understands whether they choose to keep it or leave it. When they grow, they're 18 years old, they do what they want. They understand at least what spirituality and walking with God looks like.
It's great. Discipleship.
Yes.
Yes.
And I liked what you said in your book that, quote, she has likely spent more time with you than anyone else. So if you've seen a change in her, the most obvious place to start is with you. Whether you like it or not, our wives are the most glaring reflections of our leadership.
Michael, I don't mean to cut you off, but I could tell you a story. Bree could tell you a story. We've had our first 5 years, I was such a selfish leader. She won't say that because she's so kind, but I really was. And there was that time when we were in the bathroom, and what is it you said? You said, I love you, but I don't like you. Mm-hmm. So the backdrop of that was, and then I said to you the same thing, I love you, but I don't like you, is we had two little kids, and I had just become really selfish. I was focused on ministry. I was not focused on you. Anything in there you would add?
Well, I wasn't a believer either, so I was doing a lot of things.
You just opened up a whole other can of worms. Yeah.
So I was doing a lot of things underneath the surface that was making it difficult for you.
Passive aggressive. Mm-hmm. But that actual morning, what prompted that conversation, do you remember, was I had got up early to sneak out of the house to get off to work because I knew if I stayed, the kids would wake up. I peek in the door to say goodbye to Ethan, who's 1.5, and I could smell the smell coming out of the room. And so, long story short, he had opened up his diaper and went Pablo Picasso all over the walls, and I could barely see through the shadows what had happened. And I knew I have a choice to make. Either I'm going to go in and clean up, or I'm going to just close the door and move on with my day. And so I closed the door. I said, hey, have a great day. I love you, sweetie. And I left. And that really, for her and for I, primed a very important conversation about selflessness.
Wow.
There's so much to work out when we're first married. I just think back to all the things that almost look back in horror sometimes on how we had to work out how we're going to treat each other and communicate with each other, and how much we just affect each other, but God has appointed the husband as the leader of the family, and I like your emphasis on that. And I like to think of our home as a little church, and the husband is the senior pastor who is responsible for discipling his family. And if he sees something that's not right in his marriage, he's on it. He's engaged and doing what it takes to work to make it better as a top priority. And I think God is looking to the husband as ultimately responsible for the health of his family. And if something's not healthy, he's to take leadership to fix it, to talk to the pastor, read books, seek counseling, whatever, try different things, but be a leader in this.
And I love how you address this. Like you guys are talking about that incident that you guys had in your marriage, and I'm so grateful that you shared it because it just kind of brought back memories for me too. Like, you said it was in the bathroom. I was like, oh man, ours was in the kitchen. So it's like the you brought this situation, and it just kind of So I love that you said that, and you were talking about leadership, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but like just going back to what Tony was saying is like you're keeping it real. Like you were actually saying, hey, I was selfish. And I think admitting that and then taking it before the Lord and repenting, and then now taking it before your spouse just makes a world difference, because now it opens the door to like heal and make your marriage stronger. So I love that. And then taking the leadership roles, as you were saying.
Right. And as far as the wives, Bree, I liked what you said about principle number 3 in your book. Don't let the feminists run you off. I just love these titles.
Yes.
Wives were created to be the helper or helpmeet. What does all that mean?
Yes. First, I wanted to turn to Genesis 2, because I feel like this verse where it's coming from, verse 18 says, Then the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him. And seeing, I believe it's the original King James Version, uses the word help meet. And that meet is just referring to someone who is appropriate or suitable. And God designed the woman to be the helper for her husband. And, that looks like, in the world that we live in, it's, you're subordinate too. And in God's design, we've been given the greatest role to be something that no one else can be in this world for him. And that is to help him fulfill just the needs and purposes that God has in his life. And I love that you said, the question that you had sent was, how does this fit in today's feminist culture? And I think back to Genesis 3 and just the beginning, when it really started way back when in Genesis 3:16, when Eve ate the fruit from the tree, and part of the curse that God gave, he says, to the woman, God said, I will greatly multiply your pain in childbirth. In pain you shall bring forth children. Yet your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. And seeing that this didn't start just with our culture, right? It has started from the beginning of time, where the woman will want to be in charge and to usurp. And in regards to today's feminism, they're emphasizing equality, they're emphasizing the independence, rejecting traditional roles. And so when we look at God's design, we see, it's countercultural, because ultimately it's reflecting, complementing our husbands, not competing with our husbands.
Yeah, when you bring up feminism, immediately my mind goes to a lot of cultural things. We were, I think, about that same time that we were just talking about with the poo-poo incident. Can we say that on Marriage Minute? Marriage
Yes.
Mania? I don't know what's allowed. So that incident. And I remember we went to a movie, and Twilight had just come out. And so my wife in 2009 goes to this really beautiful conversion, and the Lord saves her. And she was really beginning to wrestle through some of this stuff. Like, oh my goodness, everything I've ever believed culturally about how a marriage should work really is wired in feminism. And so we ended up going 2009 or 10 to Twilight. See Twilight, 'cause everyone was seeing it. We stayed up till 11:30 and got in line. And I would never recommend those movies at all. Yes. But we are literally sitting there, and she's going, oh my goodness, I am watching a teenage girl usurp, Tashuka is the Hebrew word, usurp a werewolf and a vampire. And it was the first time that we started to see just how strong those cultural overtones are, for a woman to be dominating a man. And then conversely, for men to be passive. You think about how many sitcoms always have the goofy male who can't get out of his own way, and then the dominant female who's making everything right. And so even society laughs at it and mocks it, but certainly breeds it, kind of an upside down design. In fact, you guys know Emerson Edrick's Crazy Cycle. That to me is such a beautiful illustration of that, where God intended in marriage for a husband to be sacrificially leading and guiding his wife so that she can so beautifully submit under his leadership. And that's the beautiful snowball effect that happens. And yet so often the enemy steps in, as you guys know, and breaks that cycle. So the man becomes passive and the woman becomes dominant, and everything's going exactly opposite of what the Lord intended. And so that's the way I think that we view feminism and the impact on the home. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And you said Genesis 2:18. The helper, which is, a lot of, like you were talking about feminists, there's just we see that so much. People just get so upset about that and what God says that women, their roles, and husbands and their roles. And it's just, it starts such a ripple effect, but it goes back to God's word. Like, we're not making this stuff up. God said it. And because he said it, then we need to obey and obey it in a very biblical way, and not not a domineering way, but a biblical way where we are loving each other. We are in the brotherhood, like we are to show. Like, we always talk about how how I treat Michael. I need to make sure I'm treating God's son. And then, I am God's daughter. So how he's treating me, like, how do we want to be treated? And so we want to make sure that, we have that foundation. And I love that, Bree. Everything that you said, I love it.
Yeah, we obviously agree with everything
Yes,
you guys say.
we
It's
do.
very well stated. You state things
beautiful.
very well. And it's just so important that we don't let the culture knock us off God's message. Doing marriage God's way is the best way. And God has a great design that allows us to complement each other's strengths, reflect his kingdom, and work together, pursue God together. And when we're working so well together, we can continue to pursue each other. And Tony and Bree, one of the things you talk about in your book is the lack of pursuit in marriage that tends to happen after we get married. Before marriage, the man's pursuing the woman, the young man pursues the young lady, we pursue each other, but then we get married and we stop pursuing. How does that affect the intimacy and closeness that should be in a marriage? And how do we get that back? How do we start pursuing each other again?
Yeah, I think, early on, prior to marriage, I saw very pointedly in my own heart that marriage had become, and our relationship had become, an idol. And it was idolatrous in my own heart. And the Lord actually used that to save me and make me realize that it was indeed Him that can fill that void. But I wanted to read a verse from Matthew 6. And verse 33 says, "But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things should be added to you." And I think after marriage, our responses can look differently because now we have children, now we have careers, now we have all these other things that are pulling at our interest to keep us from the prioritizing our husband. And so this verse just brings me back and reminds me to seek first His kingdom. And so often in marriage, we're forgetting that pursuing each other is part of doing just this and continuing that. And so what do you think?
I love you.
I love you.
You're so pretty. I want to pursue you right now. Yeah, we actually freak the kids out sometimes. The stuff I say, they're like, "Ooh, gross." You're a teenager now. You can handle it. The only thing I would add is I think you're absolutely right. We're nailing the heartbeat of it, and these are the core issues. And just going more practical, I do think that there is. We all know there's an emotional realities where for a man, he's wanting to conquer. That's the way we're made. And so you get married and you feel like you've done that. You're like, I won the woman, like Shrek. It's like, I won her, And I think for a lady too, I want to get married and feel safe and protected. And then you feel like, okay, that's been accomplished. There's obviously biological realities too. You start having children and bodies are changing and you're tired from working hard. And so all those things are a part of it. But here's an element that I don't think we talk about enough, which is that I don't know that we do enough training and talking honestly with our children, the next generation, about just how much work marriage is. I think we tend to live on these romantic rom-com views of marriage, and even our dating construct is outside in. So you think about dating, we're starting with physical, and then we're going to feelings, and then maybe if you stick around long enough, you talk about faith and values. But that happens again and again and again. And so by the time people walk down the aisle, they're living on a battery of physical intimacy, a battery of feelings, which just runs out all the time. Whereas if we can flip that paradigm around and start training our kids, it's work. It is a covenant, as we talked about. It is not going to be easy. And in fact, that battery is going to run out often if you're living on the physical. And so if you don't have faith and values and spirituality, this thing is going to really struggle. And so I think there's a biological element, there's an emotional element. Certainly the core is spiritual, but there's also even a practical element where we have to really start helping the next generation understand just how much investment true love is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
Yes, and we just love everything you're saying here, and if we're not pursuing each other, the natural course of affairs is to drift apart, and if we need to continue to pursue each other, pursue God together, always looking for ways to develop our relationship and become closer, date our spouse, create warm family times and such, and we just thank you so much for all the great insights today. It's brilliant.
And I want to also add that I love that you guys, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. I love that you guys are talking also about passing this on to the next generation. That is a passion of mine. It's something that we talk to our daughter about, what are the characters that we, this is a whole nother podcast, but it's just something that we have to do. We're modeling our marriage for our children. We want to make sure our children understand that, marriage is not this, like you were saying, this fantasy kind of princess thing. There's going to be some hard times. There's going to be some amazing times, some joyous times, seasons of life change. God didn't say that we would live a life that's so perfect. He said we will have many troubles. There will be tribulations that we will have to deal with. And sometimes, that happens in marriage. And depending on, families being lost or, a loved one or something like that. But I love that you guys are talking about passing it on to the next generation and the importance of teaching our children about marriage. And that's just, we talk about this all the time. So I'm like, you struck a chord with me because I'm like, that's just like pulling at my passion, and what God has put in my heart is like, if I can do anything, I want to model our marriage, and I want to teach Jesus to my children, to my child, to pass it on to my grandchildren and continue on as long as the Lord lets me live.
Yeah, we just loved the recent podcast you had with your teenage daughter, and I loved what she said about dating. As a teenager, she said, "I'm focused on my walk with the Lord. Why be focused on dating when I'm too young for it to go anywhere? Let me build my relationship with Jesus." What a great response!
Fire!
What every parent would want to hear. That it sounded like you guys had. I've had this conversation before with your children about what the purpose of marriage is and where our focus should be. And, we have a young daughter that will be a teenager before we know it. Sometimes it feels like she's already one. And we'll be looking at boys in a totally different way. I'm not looking forward to that day. Did you guys have conversations with your children about what to do with these feelings, dating, how to pick a godly spouse?
Yes. Lots of late night talks. Very thankful for really my husband just being able to exemplify what a man of God looks like to her, so that she's not tempted to be satisfied with anything other than that. And someone who loves the Lord, and any attention that's given to her, it's a constant talking process of how to navigate all the emotions, because it's not that it's absent. Those thoughts are absent. It's how do we walk through them.
Your daughter Talitha is 8. So, yeah, it's coming. You got a year and a half if you're lucky. And, I think number one, being in a good local church is so key, because we're surrounded, our kids are surrounded by wonderful pastors and elders who are all saying the same things. But yeah, Bree mentioned it. Those late night talks, when you go into Talitha's room and it's 9, 10 o'clock, that's when they want to have the big talks. And everything inside of us wants to shut down and go to bed and avoid that hour because it's late and we've got a lot to do. But that really is the hour where I think a preteen's heart is most vulnerable. It's most open. My daddy will come in and he'll put his arm around me and lie on the bed with me, and he'll cuddle me. And in that moment, she's experiencing such safety that she trusts that is the one who's going to hand her off to her next form of safety. And I started telling Peyton, we'd go for walks, and I would just tell her, I'd say, hey, the hardest part about the teenage years is that there's one lie that matriculates up again and again and again in our flesh, and that's that my parents are not my advocate, they're my adversary. We're going to come back to this again and again. I want you to remember that we have the same goals. I know you want to move on. I know you want to get a hot husband. I know you want him to love the Lord. I know you want to have a family, make babies. And guess what? That's exactly what I want for you too. So when I'm saying no, or I'm speaking wisdom into things, or your mother and I are, it's not because we're against you. It's because we're for you, and we want what's best in God's eyes for your future. And so, yeah, we've enjoyed those talks. There's been a lot of hard ones. I think one thing I'd recommend, if parents, and we're learning as we go, let me say, we are in the middle of it. We got college, high school, and junior high, and we are not on the other side. So we're saying all this humbly, not knowing what the future holds. But I do think one thing that constantly I come back to when it comes to these things and I'm totally blanking on what it was. So never mind. I forget. It was good, though. It was good.
No, we're so thankful and just the passion that you have to teach about marriage. And if more children, if they learn that from their parents, then, maybe they would make those choices, and parents being more involved. So I know that's like a whole nother topic, and we would love.
Tell you, I would want. It sounds like your child is right on course to be able to say a good answer when she's asked the question, "Why are you getting married?" And I think every believer should go into pre-marriage counseling ready to answer that question of why are you getting married? Well, let me open up the Bible and explain to you the purpose of marriage and how we plan to do marriage God's way. And I just think there needs to be more teaching on this in the church, in the pulpit, and Sunday school classes of all ages, at age appropriate levels. And especially at home in family Bible times, family discipleship, and like how you guys did it, just the in the moment kind of life lessons while they're listening, long before our children have any boyfriends or girlfriends on their radar. If we don't have a firm grasp of God's purpose and design for marriage, we won't see the importance of picking a spouse who's a strong believer. We won't.
Michael, you just made my point for me. So that's what it was, the one that I'd forgot. Is starting early and making sure that way before they're even thinking about it, those conversations are happening. So that was the one that I forgot. Thank you for covering me.
Because if we wait to have that conversation when our daughter comes home with an axe murderer, that conversation is not going to go well about how to pick a godly spouse. It's that conversation's going to sound like it's just, we don't like your choice here, and we're just talking bad about them. This has to be a conversation long before then, where we're just talking theoretically about, be thinking about what is God's design for marriage, and how do we pick a godly spouse. Be thinking about that. Have a strategy going in, because if we don't have that direction guiding us, then it's just left to be haphazard, and who knows what will happen.
This is awesome. We're so excited to talk to you about the book that you have, The Little Red Book for Marriage and Family. We're so excited that you guys were here, and please tell our audience about how they can find you and about your book and everything, because this is super exciting and we want to be able to share with as many people as possible.
Yeah, we would love to connect with all the marriage mania people, friends and followers. Date Night with the Woods is Instagram. datenightfam.org is the website. And then Little Red Book is out, available for pre-order, and release happened on the 14th of February, Valentine's Day.
I love the name Little Red Book. It's so cute. It really is. So Bree, Tony, we are just blessed that you guys had a time here, and we're just so excited, and we pray that God will just share that book and many will get that and apply a lot of these amazing principles that you have in their marriage. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for your ministry. Thank you for having us on. It's been such a joy to get to know you guys, and we'll be praying for you as well. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, it really is neat when you connect with people and it feels like kindred spirits, where you're like, these people love Jesus. And so we feel honored to be a part of this today.
Thank you so much. That was a great podcast. I really love Bree and Tony. They're just so sweet all the way on the other side of the country. I loved what they had to say about the Little Red Book of Marriage and Family. It's just such a cute little name. I don't know why. It's just so cute. But I love that they were focused on the purpose of marriage and making a charge to husbands for their leadership role and for their spiritual leadership role. And then I love how Bree really addressed the feminist view and the importance of how God made a wife and a husband to work together in marriage. Like, we're a team, and we also have specific roles. And I love that she hit Genesis 2:18, that is like the theme of our Helper Bible study. And so that is just, I was just so over the top there. And then the leadership, which we've also talked about in the covering. So their little book of marriage and family is amazing. And we recommend that book for couples who are just getting married, have been married. If you've been married for 50 years, we want to be able to get our marriages in a very healthy place. I think a lot of times people say, well, we've been married for 30 years. We don't need any kind of ministry. We don't need any kind of help. We don't need this or that. But we do. We have to. So you got to change your oil, right? You can't just ride on your car this entire time and not change your oil. So there's got to be maintenance that has to happen in your marriage. And the same thing with reading books, getting resources, going to conferences, doing Bible studies that actually pull out information about marriage and how we need to be doing this together, and teaching our children about marriage and teaching them the importance of how to pick a right spouse and how to live your life for Jesus, not for your flesh and looking out for who can I marry? I want to have children. I want to do this. No, it's intentional discipleship in marriage and passing it on to the next generation. It was a great conversation with Bree and Tony.
Yes, and I really identified as a former pastor's kid about being asked the question that
I remember that question.
Yeah,
too.
why are you getting married? And we're like,
we sat there, right?
It's like, man, I should be ready with an answer right away.
Right.
And I'm like rolling in my head. What's the reason for marriage? What's the reason for marriage? And we're fumbling because we love each other, and we're doing
and your dad was very challenging.
Yeah, because he kept homing in to like, well, you can still date and do that. Why do you have to get married? Really trying to home in what is the actual purpose and reason for marriage? What is God saying? I wish I would have been ready to like open up the Bible. Well, this is what God says about marriage, and this is what we want to fulfill in marriage. We want to do God's design.
We need to talk to your dad again and say, hey, we got the answer for you now.
Disciple children in the Lord.
Yeah.
And, I just love that importance as well about teaching that to our children. Let's make sure our children are ready to come into a premarital counsel session and be able to answer that question. Why are you getting married? What's the purpose of marriage? What is God's design for marriage? And let them be ready to say, well, let me tell you about my Jesus.
Yes.
Let me tell you about how God created marriage and what he created it for and how we plan to do it God's way. What an awesome answer. Man. We should be all ready to do that and have that answer.
Yes, I love that. And I love that Bree and Tony are just being so intentional about it, and getting this book out there is just going to be amazing. And so we do recommend that you get that book, check it out. We're all here to support one another because every marriage needs support. Every marriage needs help. Every marriage needs maintenance. Every marriage needs Jesus. And that's the most important thing. If anything else, Jesus is the foundation and the center, the rock, the threefold cord that needs to be a part of marriage. And without that, it's not going to flow as what God intended. Yes, there's many people that have been married for many years and they don't have Jesus, and they could be married for 30, 50 years, but there is still something missing. God is the center. He is the creator. And so when we do marriage God's way, we reflect Jesus to the world. And it's just amazing because marriage is our ministry. That's a ministry. And so we are so grateful to be able to have Bree and Tony on the podcast. Please check them out. And also, we have a podcast that comes out every Tuesday where we talk about marriage and family. We love to talk about discipleship and raising the next generation, but also really discipling couples. Marriage is foundational, and that is the family. And so we love to talk about this topic. We're just so thankful. And so please tune in, give us a thumbs up, and until next time.
God bless.